So, guys, I don't know if you've heard the term faux pas. Faux pas. It's actually a French word, FAUX, and then PAS. Faux pas. What is a faux pas? A faux pas is something that you shouldn't do. By doing it, it would be wrong. It would be awkward. It would be socially awkward, potentially awkward. And why are we talking about that? Because we are going to talk about the faux pas, the things that you should not do in the US. These things would be considered strange, rude, bad manners, maybe culturally awkward if you do these things. So these are, again, they're called faux pas. It's a French word that Americans use. These are things that you should not do. These are faux pas. Let's start with the first one. So we've got Leon. So hey, Leon, have you are aware of some faux pas? Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Okay, you know how when people share too much or they overshare, we call it TMI, as in too much information, TMI, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's definitely a faux pas when you overshare, when you share things that are too intimate, too detailed, too deep into your life with people you don't know. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that's definitely a faux pas. So, like for instance, if you just met somebody, let's say you just met somebody at a party, everybody's having a good time, and then all of a sudden you're talking about I don't know, your terrible breakup or your divorce and how you're just emotionally spiraling, and then how you're
Yeah.
going through depression, and then you're talking about your the custody of your children, and like it's too personal, right? So
Hmm.
when you share things that are overly personal when it's not yet time to share these things, then that's considered a faux pas. Or maybe you're at work and people are just having sort of casual conversations at work, and then you start talking about how your son got arrested for for something, and then it's kind of like, why are you telling us this, right? Like, it's too much information. People don't need to know, people don't want to
Hmm.
know. And while
Hmm.
you might think of it as, oh, I'm just opening up, it's like there's a time and a place. And so when you overshare intimate details of your life or about you, then it's a faux pas, and it's frowned upon. You should not do it. People will not like you. They might dislike you. It's very risky to overshare. I mean, you might think, oh, it helps bond people when they share personal details. And while that might be true, I would argue that when you do it too soon, and after you've met somebody, you don't know them very well, or depending on the setting, when you share too much, then that's definitely a faux pas. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And Americans are also guilty. It's not just non-Americans. A lot of Americans, they kind of forget where their place are, especially at work. They think that they can talk about this with their coworkers, thinking that they're family or friends. But no, you're still a coworker. You're not really part of the friends, the inner circle, or even a close friend, right? You're just or part of a family.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they're going through rough times, they need to vent and they need to talk about their issues instead of getting a counselor or maybe a really close friend. They start sharing things, and usually this is not a good idea. Like what you just indicated, you're going through a divorce or you had a breakup with your girlfriend, or some things that happened in your weekend with your girlfriend, and you start venting to other coworkers and other people. No, this is something that you need to know when to say things at the right time. I mean, you got to know people, you got to see how they are, and before you start getting into this. I don't
Yeah.
know if you put in a frame, a time frame. Maybe could be 3 months or it could be 2 months. Depends on your click with, your connection with that individual. I mean, you can hit it off right really well in the beginning and start going out on weekends as friends and hanging out. But too much information, you don't want to do this at work because you never know. They may use that against you in the long run if your friendship breaks up, especially at work. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, because that sort of ties into you have to know how to have a conversation like an American does, right? So, for example, a lot of times, again, at the workplace, or even just, you're waiting for your coffee in line at Starbucks, or you're just being friendly to the cashier or something. There's certain things that you just don't talk about. In other words, you have to learn how to have I guess if you want to call it fake conversation, yeah, you have to learn how to have fake conversations in America, which is just conversations that are just very generic, very pleasant, that doesn't trigger anybody. Sort of like conversations about the weather. Oh, did you have a nice weekend? Just very surface level, superficial conversations, and those are completely appropriate depending on the setting. You just don't want to go too deep because then it'll just be considered weird. It's definitely a faux pas, so don't do it. You have to learn how to have casual conversations that are pleasant, they won't offend anyone, and they are just surface level.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's great that you mentioned that about, making fake conversation and fake topics and things that may not interest you, but you just want to fit in. For
Yeah.
me, it's like I always tell people, like, in our real life, sometimes we feel like we're acting in our real life, right? We're like
Yeah.
actors and actresses. We don't really say and share our true feelings and things because otherwise we're going to be judged or we're going to be, written off or things like that, and politically incorrect. So you just have to be careful in what you say. Nowadays, you can't really express what your true feeling is, otherwise you're gonna be written off. So you just
Yes.
have to be careful. So yeah.
Yes. So until you know somebody really well, that is definitely a faux pas to overshare. So, okay, what's another faux pas, Leon?
Yeah, another one would be like standing too close to others, right? Or touching
Mm,
them inappropriately,
yeah.
especially when you start touching people at work and opposite
Oh,
sex.
never do that. Never.
You can be sexually harassed, you can lose your job, be sued, and so you got to be really careful in how you approach the opposite sex. And even with the same sex, you just never know what people may think of, even though you feel like it's nothing, right? It's like a
Hmm.
friendship. You just got to be careful, right? What do you think about that?
Well, the idea of personal space, if you violate the personal space of Americans, it's considered a faux pas. And I know that in other countries, what's considered acceptable personal space is a fraction of what is required in America. So just to let you guys know, if you're not American, if you've never been to the US, Americans need a lot of personal space. Do not stand close to them. Whatever you think is acceptable, I would multiply that by 3 times and then step back, because I guarantee, because like for example, like I'm in Europe and I noticed that the distance that you can be standing next to somebody in line or whatever, it is so close that to an American it's just very uncomfortable. And this happens all the time. I'm always having to step away from people because they're getting too close to me and there's no reason for it. So just make sure that if possible, stand about at least one arm, stretch out your arm, at least, at minimum, absolute minimum, stand at least one arm's length from someone, at the very minimum, because Americans don't like when you get close to them. That's just how we are. We don't like it.
Mhm.
Don't do it. If you do it, it's considered a faux pas, especially if you don't know them, especially if maybe you're in a work environment or you're just in an environment where you just don't know somebody. Don't stand next to them. Listen, if you can smell their hair, you're standing too close. I've had people stand that close to me where I can smell their hair and their shampoo, and I'm like,
Mhm.
oh God, that's disgusting.
Especially the breath, right? Yeah.
Well, that, and smokers are the worst because
Hmm.
even when they exhale, they smell like an ashtray, and I find that disgusting.
Yeah. Right.
So if you're a smoker, don't breathe around me.
Yeah.
Don't breathe around me. Don't breathe around other people
Right.
Americans. In other words, just don't stand. Just don't stand that close to an American. We don't like
Mhm.
it. We are put off by it. We're immediately put off by it. You can be guaranteed of it. And if and the only time that won't happen is if maybe you're attracted to somebody, then you're not gonna be put off by them standing so close to you. But short of that, then don't stand so close to somebody.
Mhm. I think part of that too, a lot of the non-Americans or the foreigners, I think they stand close to you, especially when they're talking to you, is they're trying to read your lips because we're American, English is their second language. A lot of them tends to look at the mouth and try to read it to make sure they understand us. And in order to do that, they got to get close to kind of read what
I don't
what your
know.
lips are saying. So that's a possibility because that did happen to me one time before. I
Really?
visited a foreign, yeah. I
Oh.
visited a foreign country and a security guard. I started, talking. I purposely talked fast because he wouldn't let me in because there were certain restrictions, and I was just talking in English to kind of so I can get through that, his security guard responsibility. And I started speaking fast, and he came really close to me, like he literally, like I would say about maybe 5 inches away from me. And he
Mm.
started looking at my mouth, my lips, and how I was talking. And for me, I felt uncomfortable. I kind of like took a step back, and
Interesting.
but I think that was because he was trying to read my lips. Yeah.
Well, I think staring also is another faux pas, isn't it? Along those
Yes.
lines, just
Hmm.
just with a fixed, locked stare at somebody. That's a very socially awkward thing. You don't want to do that. That's very strange when you just stare at.
Hmm.
Because I know that in some cultures, I don't know. I feel like it's not that big of a deal, or maybe it's even okay. But with Americans, it makes you look really weird, and it's kind of bad when you're caught staring at somebody. This happens when I travel to foreign countries. I've noticed that people will stare for whatever reason. And it's not that necessarily they're staring because they don't like you. It could be that they like you, but
Hmm.
regardless of the reason why you're staring at somebody, don't do it in America. I mean, if you're doing it in another country, that's none of my business because it's not my It's not my country. But nonetheless, we Americans feel uncomfortable when people stare,
Yeah.
with a locked stare, because it also comes off as aggressive too. So.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was at Walmart one time, and this dude was literally yelling and disciplining his son, whatever his son did, and he was yelling with a loud voice. And this American woman, she stopped and started looking while he was scolding his, son. And he looked at her and he says, "What are you looking at?" And then,
Yeah, you see,
and
yeah.
yeah, he says, "What are you looking at?" And she was like, "Oh," and she just started walking away. Yeah, I mean, you can look, but make sure that person doesn't see you looking, kind of
Yes.
in a glance. But she literally stopped and looked at the guy, and what are you doing to your son or something like that. So yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
expect a backlash. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
um what
What
else?
What do you think? Yeah. What do you think is the next one would be?
I think there's a lot of talk about using cell phones, texting, using, you know, um,
Hmm.
tech at the dinner table. And I think that there's definitely a faux pas element to uh, texting or using your phone at the dinner table when you're having dinner with people. But
Hmm.
I don't think it's like I don't think it's like, oh, for sure, like you absolutely can. I don't think it's like a strict rule. I think it definitely is a faux pas if you're using your phone during dinner at the dinner table. If you're using your phone in a way that doesn't involve other people, where you're just kind of doing your own thing, you're in your own world, I think that is bad. Don't do that. But I think that if you're using your phone in a way that engages everybody and fosters conversations, that's okay. So, for example, if I'm using my phone to pull up a picture to show everybody so we can all talk about it, that's okay. But if you're just using your phone and you're just texting, you're in your own world, you're whatever, then I think that's not good. That's a faux pas. That's like dining etiquette also. The crossover there
Hmm.
is dining etiquette, right? Where you just don't just ignore people and get on your phone. And if you're going to do that, if you have to return a text, I think that the thing you need to do is just say, "Oh, excuse me for just a second. I just need to reply to this text real quick." And that's okay. But generally, if you're just sort of detaching from the group and you're on your phone, that's a faux pas. That's something you don't want to do.
Yeah, I say good judgment. Use your good judgment.
Yeah.
If you're in a group and everyone's talking, you don't want to isolate yourself and just start going in your own world and start, checking the social media. I mean, that's pretty rude.
Hmm.
Engage with it. Show people that you're listening, and engage yourself. Start talking and uh, talk about the things that you want to talk about. Control the conversation. Don't just
Yeah.
be there, listening and like you're bored and start doing your cell phone. If that's the case, why are you even there? You might as well just go home, right? It's
Hmm.
very rude to other people, and you get yourself disengaged. And I disagree with people doing that. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think it's
It's
good etiquette. Yeah.
definite faux pas. What other
Hmm.
faux pas related to maybe at the table or at a restaurant?
Yeah, like maybe like chewing with your mouth open when you're chewing a gum or something, or even talking with your mouth is full, right? You
Oh
never
yeah.
want to do that, or
Yeah.
reaching for across, other people's plate where instead of just saying, "Hey, can you pass me the salt and the pepper?" and you just literally just stand up and reach, over their plates while they're eating. I think that's something you don't want to do. Especially other
Yeah.
people too. They're enjoying their food and they're chewing and with their mouth open and with sound. I mean,
Oh,
that
Sam,
happened before. Yeah, that happened before. Yeah.
like that. That's super annoying, and that's a really bad thing to do. That's definitely bad.
Yeah.
Being a loud eater.
Yes.
You do
I
that at
was
home.
yeah, I was like having lunch. I had a coworker and another person. We were all three auditors there, and
Mm.
we were having lunch. And the dude was like started chewing, and he was enjoying his food, and he had this sound, and I was like, I was just like kind of staring at him, and I saw my coworker. She was like nothing was happening, and he says, "Oh, I need to use the restroom." And the first thing he went to the restroom, I was like, "Can you believe that? I mean, he's like eating with the sound." And she says, "Oh no, it's so annoying. I'm gonna tell him." And I was like, "Oh really?" And I was surprised that she was literally gonna, bluntly say it. And when he
That's
came
funny.
back and he started doing it, and she was like, "Can you stop that?" And he was like, "What?" And says, "Stop chewing with with that noise, with that loud noise." Says, "Why? Does it interrupt you? Is it?" Says, "Yeah, it's really bad. I
He
don't like
didn't
it."
know. He didn't even know he was making all
Yeah,
that noise.
no, he says,
Wow.
"Oh yeah, that's what my girlfriend said too. I mean, she tells me about it." And honestly, he doesn't know. I mean, he's really enjoying his food and he's just, chewing with his mouth open, making that loud noise. And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, that's like really bad manners, no
That
etiquette."
is, yes.
Yeah.
Or also, it's really bad manners to be eating with your hands if it's not something that should be
Mm,
eaten with your hands.
yes.
Pushing your food around on your plate with your fingers. I've seen people do that. I've seen people push
Mm.
like something onto their fork with their finger, then or maybe they're licking their fingers. Oh, God, please
Oh
don't do
yeah.
that. That's a faux
Yeah,
pas.
that's so
Yeah.
true. Yeah.
Yes. Don't do
Well,
that.
sometimes, people do that because they're eating pizzas or fried
Well, that's
chicken and
okay.
yeah, okay. Like
Yeah.
when they lick their
Yeah.
their fingers.
if
Yeah.
you're if you're you look, there's certain foods that of course you eat with your hands, but if you're eating ice cream with your hands, you've got to know that's wrong. That's not a good
Yeah.
idea. You're not eating
Yeah.
ice cream with your hands, for God's sakes. If it's in a dish, you're using a spoon, right? You're not
Hmm.
eating rice with your hands, for God's sakes. In America, you're not doing that. Please don't do that. That's a faux
Hmm.
pas. That's really
Or
gross.
sushi, right? When
Now,
people are
oh,
eating
that's
their
okay though.
sushi with their
Sushi's okay,
fingers,
but
you
that
think is okay? I don't think that's okay.
oh,
Yeah.
don't. Oh, you don't. You never use your fingers to
No.
your fingers to pick up a sushi roll.
A
Is it
sushi? No, no,
actually?
never.
Can I ask you something? Actually, is it bad? Is it wrong to not use chopsticks to pick up a sushi roll? That I'm not even sure about.
Well, I don't think it has to be a chopstick because some people don't use chopsticks. At least they use a fork or something. But
Yeah.
but eating a sushi with a chopstick is like eating a steak with your hands too, right? I mean,
Ah.
not eating sushi with your chopstick. I mean, with your fingers. So it's like you cut up the steak and then you eat that piece of steak with your finger. It's
Yeah.
no different than you taking a
That's funny.
sushi and eating with your fingers too. I
I,
mean, a lot of Americans do this. I mean, don't get me wrong.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
but to me, that's an etiquette. Yeah.
Ah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. But
Uh,
people do this. Yeah.
they do.
But those are
Yes.
like more, that's like, for me, it's like more of an educated person, to be honest with you. It's
Hmm.
like no etiquette. Yeah.
Um, okay, so along the lines of we're still in the restaurant. One more thing about while you're in a restaurant, it's a real faux pas to not tip properly. So in America, you have to tip at a full service restaurant. If you have a server or whatever, you got to tip the minimum tip. You really, unless they really screwed up, you really have to give a minimum tip of 15%, even though it's quote, whatever you think is appropriate. It's really 15 to 20%. If they did a good job, it's 20% without blinking an eye,
Hmm.
automatically. If it was satisfactory, 15. If you go lower than 15, that conveys they did something wrong. It was the service was bad, or if none of the above, then then you've committed a faux pas, right? It's you
Hmm.
that's done something wrong if you give less than 10%. Excuse me, less than 15%. I will also say that uh, you know if you want to hear the most racist, stereotypical things, ask a waiter. about who tips how, because I tell you, waiters, they've got everyone profiled. They will tell you what race, what color, what gender, what age, everything, the way they dress, down to they know how these people are going to tip. I've met a lot of
Hmm.
waiters that will tell you, oh, this racial group tips like this, that age group tips like this blah 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 tips like this. They've got everyone profiled. They're the most un-PC people, if you want to look at it that way. And so the thing of it is that if you commit this faux pas of not tipping properly, unfortunately, you're saying to the waiter, everybody in my group, whatever, is like this. That's how they see you. That's what
Hmm.
waiters always that's what they always do. They always say, "Oh, this type of person, they're terrible. They never tip well." They always talk like that.
Hmm. And don't get it wrong, too. A lot of Americans, they tip just a normal 15%, or some even
Yeah.
Americans, they even tip less than 15%. You go, depends on what part of the state you're in, right?
Yeah.
Some of them, they feel like, why do I need to tip 15%? It's optional. But
Yeah.
in a general rule, you tip 15%. But a lot of Americans don't do that, especially foreigners, because they don't learn this. It's part of the culture. It's not part of the language. So they're not aware of this. So they don't need, they think tips are already included in the, in the receipt or in the bill, right? So
Yes.
that's why they don't tip. But in all honesty, some people tips more than 20% or maybe even 25%. But that's because we understand their responsibilities, what they go through, and just being generous. So it really depends on the individual. I'm not saying all American tips 20%. No, I don't think that. But the majority of them do tip 15%. Yeah.
Yes. That's if you don't, then it's a faux pas. So make sure you tip
Yeah.
properly.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're done with food and restaurants. What's the next faux pas?
I'd say it's like bringing up, sensitive subjects like topics like
Mm.
politics that you want to discuss, religion, or even about, how much you make, your salary, or even the things like what's your age, or are you married
Oh
or
yeah,
single? Do you
that's
have any
right.
children?
Yeah.
Those are the things you don't want to bring up, especially when you just met the person. Yeah. What do
Mm,
you think?
yeah. I think that unless you're really close to these people that you're talking to, do not, unless you just want to cause trouble or you just want to get people annoyed or you just want to stir the shit, as we say.
Yeah.
Don't talk about politics. Don't talk about religion, because these are things that people get very charged about, especially in America right now in 2024. You want to talk about politics? Just be ready. Just be ready for a fight. Make sure there's no knives on the table. It's like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So just be aware of that. Unless you just want people to get agitated, then go ahead. Yes, then absolutely talk
Yeah.
about religion and politics. But if you want to just keep things, sort of calm and friendly, I would avoid those topics. They're generally said to be topics that you should avoid talking about at the dinner table anyway.
Hmm. Yeah, if you want to rile things up in a topic or just shake things up, yeah, start talking about politics and religion. That will move things in the conversation. They'll look at you funny. Some of them will probably all of a sudden there'll be silence and probably don't want to talk to you anymore after that. But
Yeah.
if you want to do it, go ahead. But prepare for the repercussion. But never talk about religions and politics. And a lot of foreigners, to them in their country, this is considered normal, especially
Right.
politics. But in the United States, you don't want to talk about that because they're different people beliefs, and it can, it it becomes, instead of a debate or an open discussion about opinion, it becomes more of a heated discussion, taking
Yeah.
it personal. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Unless you just want to quickly filter somebody out. Like if you're
Yeah.
somebody who's like, you know what, I'm Republican. I don't want any Democrat friends. So I'm just gonna ask right off the bat their political views. And if they get pissed, then I know that I don't want anything to do with this person. So if you want to be like that, then go ahead and talk about politics. But if you just want to kind of keep the peace, then don't.
Hmm. Exactly.
And also the other thing that might not be as obvious is something like, don't ask somebody how much they paid for something. Don't ask them how much money they make. Topics of conversation that get very detailed, like down to the dollar amount, is usually not a good idea.
Hmm. I mean, some people are nosy. They want to know because they want to, they're in the same profession. They want to apply, for or get an idea about the salary range. But this
Yeah.
is not the right time for you to ask something like that. I mean, because it's something confidential and private. And when you start talking about this, it's like, do I want to be around this person? Do I want to be around this, in circle with this person? I mean, if you want to talk about salary and things, get to know the person first. Maybe like after 1 month or 2 months after you really get to know that person and you have that kind of connection and you build that friendship, then you can start kind of thinking about, how to talk about the salary and see if your friend or that person is open about this discussion. But other than that, don't bring it up like immediately. You just met the person an hour ago or less than an hour ago and you start talking about or asking this type of question. No, you don't want to do that. Same thing like saying, oh, are you single or married? Because if you say, are you single or are you married? You don't know if that person is going through a divorce. And if you say, oh, are you married or single? And says, no, I'm divorced. I'm going through a divorce right now. That is an awkward situation. You don't want to be in that situation, that conversation. Yeah.
That's true because in other cultures, it seems like it's not a big deal to ask somebody if they have
No.
kids or if they're married or
Yeah.
what. But in America,
Yeah.
it's not like that. It's like if excuse me, if people don't bring up their marital status, then you shouldn't talk about it. If they talk about their girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever, what they did on the weekend, and they mention their partners, then it's okay. But you should not ask, "How was your weekend?" And by the way, are you married or did you spend the weekend alone? No, you don't do that.
Yeah.
It's if they don't put it into play. In other words, if they don't introduce the subject matter of the subject of their partner, then you should not be the one to ask them about it. That's how Americans are.
Mhm. And since you're, happy to ask that kind of question, we Americans are automatically thinking, oh, you interested? You want to go out with us on a date? Because why are you asking, am I single or married?
Yeah.
So if I'm single, my first impression is, oh, maybe we go out on a date. Oh no, I'm already taken, or I'm with a boyfriend, or I'm with a husband. So why ask me this thing? I mean, it's to us, it seems like you're interested and you want to go out on a date. But apparently, if this is not your intention, then why even ask?
Yeah. Yes.
You
Yes.
know?
Exactly. It's not a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
All
Especially
right.
kids too. I mean, do you have any kids?
Oh
I mean,
yeah. Right.
I know they want to talk about their kids and their family, but this is not the right time. I mean, unless that person actually asks or says that, they're married and I will spend my, weekend with my family. I have 2 kids. Unless they don't bring it up, you shouldn't talk about it. Yeah, you
Yeah.
shouldn't ask. Yeah.
One other thing I've noticed is that some women get very offended if you ask them if they're pregnant. They don't like to be asked if they're pregnant.
Yeah.
Because first of all,
Uh-huh.
you might get it wrong, and then you just accuse them of
Yeah.
being fat, right? So
I was about to say that. Yeah,
yeah. So don't. It's
exactly.
generally not a good idea unless they say that they're pregnant. So that's another thing I've noticed.
Especially age too. You never want to ask a woman like, "Oh, so how old are you?" You know,
Yeah.
even though
Yeah.
you say your age, "Oh, I'm this age," and how old are you? Yeah, you don't want to do that
Yes.
unless they bring it up. Yeah,
Yes. Oh, and you don't, for sure, in a professional environment, you
yeah,
don't ask people their age. That's for sure. I mean, the
hmm
workplace as a whole. I mean, I feel like we can do a whole different podcast specifically on specific faux pas related to work. But yeah, especially at
hmm
work, you don't want to talk about age and religion,
hmm
politics, those. It's even stricter. It's even
hmm
stricter when it comes to the work environment.
hmm
Speaking of work environment, how about arriving late for meetings and appointments? That's a big
hmm
faux pas, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something you never want to do. Arriving late in meetings and appointments. It just shows you how you're not reliable. You're not committed, right? You're lazy, and I mean they can come up with so many things. You're not disciplined. I mean that's something you don't want to do.
Yeah, yes, exactly. But it was very interesting is like in a work environment, in a professional setting, you never want to be late. However, you don't want to be early either. But now in a social setting, if you're invited to a party, you never want to be early. You really ideally don't even want to be on time, honestly. You don't even want to be on time. You want to be just a little bit late, maybe 15 minutes late, and that's perfectly fine. It's good, it's acceptable, it's sort of encouraged. It's almost like when if if you're invited to dinner a dinner party at 8 and you show up at well, if you show up at before 8, that's absolutely rude. If you show up at 8, that's not very that's not appreciated. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not necessarily appreciated for whatever, because I don't know why. It's just like that. If you show up 15 minutes late, that's the perfect time.
hmm
So
Yeah,
it's
it's
very
always good.
different.
Yeah, it's always good to give yourself some time before you arrive, whether you have a interview appointments or even a meeting. Get there early, talk to your peers and your coworkers, and build that kind of connection, continue that friendship. It's part of networking, right? In order to get promoted. So get there a little bit early and chat with your colleagues and coworkers, and then uh, go to the meetings. Don't want to be like 5 minutes late. Everyone's going to look at you, especially your boss, right? How are you going to get promoted if you're constantly late all the time? Yeah.
Never is the answer. Yeah, never.
Yeah,
Don't ever be late for a
exactly.
meeting, but also
Hmm.
don't ever be on time to like a party.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, next. What do you think?
What about like being overly familiar or using informal language in a professional setting? Like, say, for example, overly familiar, like you're always saying, "Oh yeah, yeah," and you seem to be like Mr. Know-it-all and always, you know, thinking that you know everything, and also like informals like, yeah, I'm gonna just chillax and I'm just gonna kick back. I mean, you can use informal things, it's just in the right settings, maybe certain phrasal verbs, maybe certain idioms that you can use more kind of informal, but overly informal languages in a professional setting is not a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, you don't want to be talking like to your supervisor, like, "Hey, what's up, bro?" Like, I don't think that's a good
Yeah.
idea at all. That's not good, you know.
Right.
But at the same time, you
Acting
don't
like
want to be,
ghetto.
yeah, you
Uh-huh.
don't want to also be overly formal either. If it's your
Yeah.
coworker, you want to call them by their first name. You don't want to call them
Hmm.
Mr. John. Oh, hi, Mr. Johnson. How was lunch? It's come on. Nobody talks
Yeah.
like that either, right? So
Hmm.
you have to learn the proper level of formality. And I mean, it almost seems counter it's almost I think it's actually not a good idea necessarily for you to be taught this. You just have to kind of absorb it, watch some TV shows, right, and you'll see how
Hmm.
people talk. But
Hmm.
yeah, you just want to have the right level of formality, which means you could be wrong by being too informal, but you could also be wrong, you could also be committing a faux pas by being overly formal, so just be aware.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like this podcast that we're on, right? Ben and I are always having conversations. This is your normal conversations, whether it's outside of professional environment and also in a professional environment. That's what we're doing in a normal conversation.
Yeah,
Something natural and ease, and this is how you normally speak in the United States. So, kind of go through that several podcasts that we have, and it'll guide you and it'll help you with your learning. Yeah.
absolutely, yes. That's why listening to a lot of natural conversations between natives is so good. This is the kind of stuff that you can't really learn. Like, to teach you is to not teach you, right? It's hard. How do you
Hmm.
formally learn this? You can only pick it up by listening, right? We're kind of
Hmm.
describing it to you right now, and you can sort of pick it up while you're listening to it. But ultimately, it just comes from immersion, watching TV shows, listening to podcasts like this. And this is the kind of stuff where even if you think you have perfect grammar, nobody cares, and people still won't like you if you commit
Hmm.
these faux pas that we've talked about. Because once again, succeeding in America, succeeding in English is not about being able to produce the language grammatically correct 100% of the time, right? Because you don't
Hmm.
live life day to day taking an English test, and those people who are so overly focused on that, they end up not really fitting in American culture because they're focused on the wrong thing, which is
Hmm.
they're focused on grammar, they're focused on being correct when they speak the language, but they have spent no time learning the culture. They've spent no time learning
Hmm.
these things that we're talking about, like the faux
Hmm.
pas and customs and things like that, right? Because the things
Hmm.
that make Americans like you, the things that make you fit in America, is, I promise you, it's not the way you speak English. It's these things that you observe, is these faux pas that you know or don't know. It'll make or break you in America. So on that note, let's continue. Let's give people more.
Yeah, I was gonna also add one more thing about
Oh
that. I
yeah.
mean, it's like people will, the traditional kind of schooling settings, and they'll say, okay, our topic conversation today is gonna be cooking, and then that's all you got to talk about is the conversation cooking. In real life, I mean, that's not a conversation. You're not gonna go in a conversation with a group of people and say, okay, our topic today is,
Yeah.
about Palestine, the Gaza. and then that's all you're going to be talking about. No, in a real life setting, in a conversation, you're going to be jumping from maybe current events, or maybe cooking, or maybe sports. I mean, you're going to be hopping around. You're going to dictate things in a conversation. That's what a real conversation is. It's not like, okay, we're going to talk about this today. I mean, no, for me, that's not like a conversation. That's not a real setting. Yeah, you can learn from those vocabularies here and there about expressing and expanding into that, but in a real life setting, you got to be universal. You got to be talking about everything. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So along those lines, what else do we
Mhm.
want to tell people?
Hmm. Not responding to emails or messages in a timely manner. I mean, that's very unprofessional. If somebody sends you an email, or even a general rule, right? I mean, if somebody sends you an email, expect 24 hours. They're not gonna, you know, uh, reply to you immediately because they got their own lives and things going on. But at least as a courtesy, they should reply to you in 24 hours,
Oh
in a
yeah,
general rule, even especially in a business environment.
sure.
But if they exceed more than 24 hours, then that's something not ethical or not etiquette. You know, maybe they forgot, but still, it shows you what kind of character you are if you don't reply within the 24 hours. I mean, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because we could even divide that up between email and text, right? Because
Hmm.
when it comes to emails, I feel like emails these days are sort of, you can give people more time, like maybe a day, or I guess if it's a work environment, it better depends what is your typical mode of communication. If you guys are typically using a messaging client, then obviously it's instant. Or if it's an email, then if it's work related, maybe it's like even within an hour or two. But generally, if you're just sending somebody an email, like if I'm sending a friend of mine an email, which I never do, but if I do, I don't expect a reply before a day or two, because that's not how we communicate, right? It depends on
Hmm.
how you typically communicate with somebody. I think that
Hmm.
with the immediacy of a text, I tend to think that if somebody doesn't respond to your text, there's no such thing as, oh, I didn't see it till the next day. 100% they saw it and they just didn't reply. Either they forgot to, or they didn't care to reply. But either way, the whole thing of is, when it comes to a text, I think there's more of a guarantee that they saw it. The lack of a reply doesn't come from not seeing it. It comes from just simply not replying, or a conscious effort made to not reply to a text. And so I think that it's definitely a faux pas to not communicate at the kind of speed that you are expected to communicate based on prior interactions. Am I making sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Especially texting. I mean, if you're not replying on a text, I mean, it shows you like you didn't really care, and you're the one who contacted that person, and when the person replies back and you don't have the courtesy to reply, I mean, it shows you what kind of a person you are, you know.
Yeah.
At least, okay, I can understand 24 hours, but anything beyond 24 hours on a
Yeah.
texting, I mean, I don't understand that. So for me, it's more about your personality, your character type of person you are. Yeah.
It also, you know what, it makes you the person who's waiting for the reply decide, do I want to deal with this person? Let me give you an example, right? So
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
messaged, I emailed a car, car leasing company, about leasing a car here in Spain, and they wrote me back. They, a few days later, which is fine. I didn't think that was outrageous, although in America that would
Hmm.
be a lot faster, but whatever. They sent me an email a couple of days later, and I said, I'm interested, what kind of cars do you have available? So this is what I mean about, this is just poor communication. She writes back and she says, oh, we have this one car. We have this car available if you're interested. I'm like, you have one car? First, that's what was going through my mind. Like, you have one? You're giving me the option of one. Are you serious? Right? Because, like most people would be like, oh, because I told her I'm looking for one with an eco sticker. It's a sticker on your car that shows that it's a environment, like a hybrid or whatever, so that you can drive in the city center. Anyway, there are a bunch of cars. There's not just one. So she writes back and says, "Oh, since you're interested in an eco sticker, this one's available." And I'm thinking, one, really? Okay. And it took 2 days to get that amazing reply. So then I wrote
Wow.
her back and I said, "Do you have some more? Maybe give me a few options and some pricing." And then she it took her like 5 days to write back.
Wow.
And so because it took that long, I'm not, I really don't want to do business with you, because
Yeah.
at when you're talking about sales, when you're talking about trying to capture the client, capture the sale, if you're not hungry enough in the beginning, if you're not hungry enough to get the sale, that tells me your company's you're no good, or your company's no good, and you're not going to take
Hmm.
care of me. I don't want anything to do with you, because I
Yeah.
don't like dealing with people who have no ambition and no hunger, because that tells me that they're not the way they communicate tells me they have no ambition and no hunger. I don't want to work with somebody like that. I want to work with people who who act like there's something at stake. I want to work with people who behave in a way like you matter and that they need to make the sale. I don't
Hmm.
want to work with people who are just like, yeah, whatever. Let me, if we, maybe we have it. Let me, let me get back to you, because I don't have a lot of time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
People who just kind of take their time and they're just sort of lackadaisical, and you kind of feel like you don't matter. I don't want to do business with those type of people.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like, you don't want my money, I'll take my business somewhere else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Uh-huh.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting, because again, I think this is cultural. This communication style, because in America, if you want to see hunger, you want to see ambition, you want to see people who hustle, that work with salespeople. Salespeople in America, oh, they are on you. They are
Hmm.
hungry. They want to sell you. They want you to buy the product. They don't wait 2 days. They don't wait 5 days to get back to you. Salespeople are aggressive in America. They will get back to you. Whereas I found
Yeah.
that, like, here in Europe, salespeople, I don't know. It's very strange. It's very strange. I don't know if they're not, is it because they're not incentivized? I'm not really sure. But in America, salespeople are incentivized. So they get a commission, they get a percentage of the sales.
Hmm.
So that's why they work, they hustle.
Yeah.
You'll get your communication.
Yeah, they won't leave you alone. If you deal with
No,
an American
yeah,
salesman, they won't leave you alone. Yeah.
no, yeah.
Hmm.
So if you're a serious customer, and you're going to appreciate that. If you're a serious customer in other countries and you encounter people who have no hunger, no drive, no ambition, that might drive you crazy, as it does
Hmm.
for me. I'm always sort of surprised at the salespeople I've encountered in Europe, where I'm thinking, like, I guess you don't need the money. You're independently wealthy. Fantastic.
Right.
Glad
Right.
you're here selling cars.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, one last one. We have time for one more.
Yeah, it's up to you. What do you think? What's your take?
How about, what, in this social climate, it's really it's a major faux pas to make assumptions, generalizations, to stereotype people based on the way they look, their color, their race, whatever. You know what? You might stereotype in your head, but in America, it would be a huge faux pas to vocalize it. So you best not do that, because it is a huge faux pas. We all
Hmm.
can't help but think what we think about people. We can't help generalizing based on our prior experience. However, in America, you better not vocalize it. You will be called out as racist, so don't do it. That's
Hmm.
just not acceptable. You just cannot, you just can't assume if somebody is a certain race that they will behave a certain way, right? And when you make these assumptions, then that's really bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of Americans. They don't want to be like, do things politically incorrect.
Yes.
They may have their opinion, but they're going to keep to themselves or
Keep it to
behind closed
yourself.
doors. Yeah, they're not going to go and verbally and start saying things like that, because you're going to get the repercussion. And who knows what that is? You can be punched in the face or something. People may not like it. You'll be surprised. So you got to be careful. Yeah.
Yeah, especially, and again, the level of sensitivity on this is lower, even lower in the workplace. So you have to be very careful about what you
Hmm.
say, because
Yes.
also any these days anymore, people can be offended by anything. People are super sensitive these days. That's why we have that term snowflake, right? You heard
Mm,
that term
yes.
snowflake, where
Right.
you can be offended by any little thing, and it's very true that people are very easily offended, and that's sort of the culture in America right now. So you have to be super careful not to jump
Hmm.
to conclusions, and not to reduce everybody to a certain stereotype based on their color, religion, or race, whatever background. And I guess that's it. That's it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, we
all
can
right.
continue on, but that's probably going to be on another time. Yeah, maybe a
Yeah,
part two. Who knows? Yeah.
we can certainly, do a part two. We can do one that's specific to the work environment. But yeah, this
Hmm.
was a good overview. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And don't forget to subscribe and also give this video a thumbs up. Thanks so much. And thank you, Leon. See you guys in the next podcast.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone. See y'all later. Ciao.
Okay, bye-bye.